Oh yeah, I did see that.
As long as they could go back and say, I did something with that, that's way more important. You know, don't go back home and be like, we just sat inside and played the game. No. I mean, we have a full responsibility of actually really taking care of the whole being in every scenario and situation. You know, and some people that may be intrusive.
Let's get
To
this.
some. I'm ready, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's a blessing, a privilege, and it's really humbling to see so many black men and also so many black women here to support a beautiful cause. My name is Antonio Ibokiri. I'm the national chairperson of the Student National Medical Association, and I am very excited to be able to partner with the Dennis Barbershop. Mr. Stan, Mr. Dennis, thank you so much for opening up your home for something so important for our community. When we think about the statistics of men of color in particular, if we said everybody to raise up, 1 in 8 of you are going to have some type of mental health condition. That's a fact. 1 in 8 of you are going to have a mental health condition, and at least 4 times of you will not do anything about it. You'll sit with it, you'll have your depression, you'll have your suicidal ideations, anxiety, you'll have all the different things that we deal with, but we suffer in silence. And so the opportunity here is for us to talk about the Barbershop Talk Therapy Project. Barbershop Talk Therapy Project is something we've been doing in the Dallas-Fort Worth community for a while. And it's an opportunity for us to give free haircuts so we can look good, you feel good, you play good, you get paid good, Deion Sanders. But also, so we can talk about things we don't really have a safe place to talk about. When I think about the barbershop, for me, it was the first place that I went to when I actually heard my dad actually talk about things at home. I actually didn't even know the man could talk. But until we got to the barbershop, that's when I knew that this was something real about it. And so this is an opportunity for us to, 1, feel safe about the things that we can talk about, but also 2, have an opportunity to figure out what do we do about the things that we feel. So we have professionals in the area, Dr. Baily, psychiatrist, LSU Department of Psychiatry Chair, and he's going to be able to kind of facilitate some of the different things that we're thinking about, the questions that we may have, and so that we can kind of know what we can do actionable with some of the different things that we're talking about. That it's known that if there's anything that is spoken, it's here, it stay here. You know, what happened in the barbershop stays in the barbershop. So even though you may see some of these different cameras, even though you may see some of these different movements, your information stays here. Your personality, your information, your history, all your traumas, all that stays here. But it stays here to be healed here. And so that's something that we need to be able to make sure that we understand. When people are talking and expressing their different things that's going on with their lives, we respect them. We allow them to speak their grievances. Because this isn't a place for us to judge what people have gone through. This is a place for us to understand and get understanding and get the help and the destigmatize mental health as we can. So we got a lot of different things going on. We got the health screenings in the back. So if you have your blood pressures that you want taken, anything of that nature, we got food out there. We got the food trucks out there. And then we got free haircuts from some of the best barbers in the New Orleans area. And so we're at Dennis Barbershop really to be able to have that conversation. And so without further ado, I would like to be able to introduce Dr. Baily, who is going to be able to kind of facilitate some of our questions, some of our concerns, and then we're going to be able to have some of the other conversation pieces from some of the other prolific folks that are in the building as well. We have 100 black men that's here. Dr. Griggs, he's a native of this community, local legend, and he's also here to kind of be able to support us in all of our endeavors and questions as well. Feel free to be able to talk about whatever is on your heart and on your mind and spirit. And so I wanted to start off by saying, does anybody have any imposter syndrome themselves that they may want to speak about?
Can you define imposter syndrome for those who don't know?
Can I define imposter syndrome? Good question, Lika. So imposter syndrome is pretty much the idea of feeling less than, even though you're in a position when you have succeeded. So being in medical school, many of us are in medical school, right? And this is a privilege to be in medical school, and it's a privilege to get a medical education. I come from a first-generation household. Nobody in my family even went to college. You get what I'm saying? I say first-generation everything because I mean it. And sometimes when I'm going through these different areas, high school, college, I always feel like I shouldn't be here. That there's something that's holding me back from being here. And so I think when we think about imposter syndrome, what is holding you back? And what are the things that you're afraid of and why are you afraid of? Right? And so I think that that's something that's relatable to all of us. And if anybody else feels some of the same things, some of the same sentiments, definitely let it be known because this is a safe space to feel.
Myself, it's not a matter of saying feeling less than. Sometimes within our own community, sometimes there are people who have a mentality that says, you know, you think you're too much, you think you know everything. So you have a tendency to actually bring yourself down because you've heard it so many times. And the biggest component of where you hear it is in your own home and in your own family, within your own family structure. And then it carries out to what we do and what we deal with in society. negatively. In some instances, we celebrate negativity. We actually, or I'm actually looking at scenarios in which going to school, as you said, the first generation. I'll give an example. I say it all the time. KD kind of like, I feel as though in some instances there are a lot of people who do right but are never rewarded for doing the right thing. We pour energy into those who have done negative things. And what impact does that have on the mentality of someone who has struggled their behind on to consistently do the right thing but still get looked upon differently? That is one of the issues that I've always maintained, but I've kept that one to myself because in some instances it relates to a few people. But at some point you never want to really make anybody feel bad about nothing. But that is one thing that always have kind of like bothered me. And that's for my dad to tell me, okay, you graduate from college, but don't go put your degree on the wall. Right? They'll treat you differently if you go put your degree on the wall. What does that say about the mentality of what we have to condition ourselves to know? Why not celebrate that? Right? That part of it has always been confusing to me. We reward the wrong and you overlook people who have done right. So that is a real puzzling situation for me. We're going to pour a lot of energy and resources into, say, delinquent kids. Right? Kids who've made bad choices. I don't call it mistakes. Right? You know right from wrong when you're small like that. Little man right there, he knows right from wrong. He's sitting right next to his daddy. There's a whole bunch of stuff he'll do, but there's a whole bunch of stuff he ain't gonna do. Right? At that age. Right? So how do we continue to actually embrace and pour resources over and over? Because we have to. We don't want to just leave anybody out, but you still can't forget about the ones who do the right thing. Right? And it's one thing to say, okay, you have everything at your fingertips. Today there's no excuse to say I don't know. You walk around with the information highway at your fingertips. It's a matter of having self-motivation to want to do better. But there's also the other part that says who can help push things. Right? And within myself, sometimes I could be surrounded by so many. And I'll say this all the time. I mean, sometimes I say it, sometimes I don't. I'm surrounded by everybody. I have answers for everybody, but sometimes for my own issues, I can't figure it out to save my life. So I sit quietly and just say to myself, who has been in this situation that came across me before? Sometimes it doesn't align in the manner in which I want to see it. Regards to what I want to see, there's a reality, and there's what it is you want to see. Right? So that's my assessment. My assessment is to accept things for what they really are, not for what I want it to be. How do I change what it is? That's the part that motivates me. So I have to change and turn that negative energy into something that motivates me to maneuver it in a different direction to work.
But what do you say to those folks who can't find that motivation, right? Because that motivation ain't intrinsic in all of us. Sometimes we need to be poured in. Dr. Baily, in terms of like a lot of the different folks that you've seen as a psychiatrist over your extensive career, what is usually kind of that it factor to provide that motivation for folks who are dealing with imposter syndrome or insecurities or anything like that?
You should think of a life in a society where often it's open discriminatory bias. Often I think issues of race, racial mistreatment and racism. And issues regarding limitation of resources that are really deserved. It really adversely affects or undermines your core identity of who you are and your belief in yourself. When one needs to find some motivation very often extrinsically to help. That's why we see so many young persons who get involved in sports. Football and basketball that builds their self-esteem and their self-confidence. We hope that somebody can do it academically or with music or other talents and traits. But I do think there's some issues that are very different and unique, I think, to African-American males. I think you pointed out very articulately why persons go to the barbershop to discuss, I think, their true feelings that they don't really show other places. I, like you, had a father who wouldn't talk much in many other settings, but would stop talking in the barbershop for 2 hours every Saturday morning. And that's when he felt comfortable, that's when he felt safe, and that's when he felt similar to your father, that people understood his past history and they resonated with his past experience. So we talk very often in psychiatry about how life experience really matters. And I'll too often in settings where others disavow your life experience or ignore it or try to undermine it. I think that your shortcomings are based on you and your individualization. I think that actually undermines, I think, your identity. We should think regarding supporting each other, enhancing, I think, our identity and our self-belief that I think we have self-actualization as others, I think are key issues of what barbershop support groups can do. This is what we call support groups in psychiatry. They may not call it that in the barbershop, but I think that's exactly what it is.
Exactly what it is.
And others do it in settings that I think are a bit more formal. But my experience has been, as you mentioned, been doing this about 30 years now, it's exactly the same valuable process for African males in a barbershop, because they believe and trust what happens there does stay there. But also what happens there, they're sharing with individuals who it means something to them. I'd also argue that we tried in other psychiatry where I am now and places where I've been before to get all clinicians, whether they're black or not, or male or not, to put themselves in a position or a role of the person they're speaking to. I heard too much in my career that one of the struggles can be you'll be an African person or a black male, and if your clinician or if your doctor devalues you or undermines you or snickers at what you're saying, or speaks back to you in a doctor-patient setting, and if they didn't hear what you actually just said, then very often that makes you feel like what you're saying is not warranted and not valued by them. Those small signs go a long way to making you lose confidence or trust in the doctor or the clinician, and therefore you can't really develop the kind of therapeutic alliance necessary for true therapy to work. That doesn't happen in a barbershop. In a barbershop, somebody responds to you, and you know they actually heard you. That's what matters.
Sometimes when we think about like not being heard and not being valued, we think about how it can affect our identity, and Dr. Baily has kind of highlighted all these different variables that affect our identity, that really kind of shape us to who we are and how we perceive ourselves. But you, somebody who's done so much work in the community, how does community really kind of protect, you know, young brothers' identities, black brothers' identities? You're kind of thinking about what does it look like for X, or what does it look like for Y and Z? What does community mean for that?
Success is a lonely road. You spend a lot of time, you guys are in med school, you spend a lot of time studying by yourself. You spend a lot of time looking at your test scores by yourself. You spend a lot of time failing forward. In your mind, you're failing, because if you get a 71, you passed. P equals MD, but it does. P equals MD.
That's what they
but
say.
We beat ourselves up because we're so hard on ourselves. If we don't step outside, if I didn't have this barbershop, I can't tell you the number of life events that I've been through in this barbershop. I'm in places that I've never thought I would ever be. I have my mentor, Dr. Alexander. I've been in other countries. I'm on TV every day as a health educator when I actually tried to get out of medicine because I didn't want to do it. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. And now I'm in front of millions of people, meeting people in strange places. But you know what's funny is? I spend a lot of time by myself. There's no attaboys. There's no, hey, great job. When you're doing well in elementary school and high school, the church celebrates, the neighborhood celebrates, the whole night. Your team celebrates the win. When you pass the test, when you pass, let me think, what's the head and neck? First year, neuro, when you pass those tests,
Barely.
nobody understands it. No, man, great job. That's what you're supposed to do, especially if you're first generation. So we have to fix our self-talk and celebrate our small wins. Get out in the community. Don't stop going to the barbershop. We started at this barbershop with just conversations and one blood pressure cup. It's simple. You don't realize the heroes, how excited. I'm wearing my heart on my chest, not on my sleeve. It's saying on my chest today. I'm so proud to see y'all here. And if nothing else, know that the other generations and the rest of the neighborhood, the barber, everybody is so proud of each of you and what it is you're doing. Remember that. If you can't smile about anything else, smile about the fact that people are smiling at you. We have to tell ourselves that and understand that what you give the community gives back a millionfold. Days I didn't feel like doing, Doc, hold on, man, tighten up. They'll call me at the Reba, man, you need to smile. What you doing, Doc? Good job. Even though you might think you're behind. So self-talk, engaging in the community, that's where it started, and that's where
And I've been hearing that from a lot from the old heads, talking about like, that's all we do as young folks, especially millennial, Gen Z or whatever, we hating on each other, we hating on each other, and that's why the community is the way it is. But maybe hearing from some of the old heads, like, what does it mean for when y'all was kind of having the same type of opportunity? Because it seemed like it really is no different than how it was for you all than it is for us, but we have a certain different level of problems as well. So
one of the differences is we weren't as connected. You would rib, and your boy, the people that talk about you, like they don't say anything good about you. If they say something good about you, they're mad in front of your face. They're mad at you. You rib. There was a place for that, but now we're so connected. You got 10,000 followers, and they say, "Oh man, look, his shirt wrinkled." You hear that resonates in your head 10,000 times, and again, you're alone.
it's like social media.
It's social media. You go through this stress by yourself, by ourselves. So it's coming to places like the barbershop where they can rib and build you up, break you down and build you up in a good way, crack in the fact.
They will break you down for you. One thing my experience has been, if you're in a barbershop, they keep it real and let you know not to get too high on your horse, so to speak. But also, I like the part of the reality is, in my experience, where I came from, Beaumont, Texas, persons actually would share with you that they really wanted to see you do well. So you recognize that there was always a home base, I think, of support, where folks believed in you and cared about you. And on your worst day, probably would take a joke about you, or give you the kind of advice, information you really needed for you to find some level of success. Maybe quietly point you in the right direction, or if not so quietly, make it very clear to you that what the expectations were, I think, of you. Many would challenge that that's kind of part of the struggle for many young people now. If it is a social media entity that actually leads to your communication experience, that's very different than persons who are not your peers, and peers who are not who are disconnected from you, but people of many regards who can be mentors and can be in a parental type or a relative type role. Historically, we thought this comment that it takes a village, and I always like this comment about it takes a village. I grew up in that kind of a setting, and it really mattered. If the persons who were nearby, you thought you really trusted in them, and they would give you advice if your father or your mother were not there to help. My peers as psychiatrists, all too often, people come to talk to me, they don't discuss, especially young adolescents or young people, that they have that level of cocoon of support around them. Often I think that's actually lost, and that's an issue that barbershops can help.
So but from the folks in here, how do you think your community is? And do you feel like your community is doing enough to support one another?
To a certain extent, that the customers meet.
It could be for anybody. It could be for anybody. It don't have to be just for you.
I mean, I was gonna mention one thing.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
I think something that always weighs heavily on my heart. I'm an emergency medicine physician, grew up in New Orleans, I'm in Philly now, is gun violence, right? There's a lot of similarities in New Orleans and Philly in regards how we handle conflict resolution. You know, if you're angry at somebody for ripping you, what are you gonna do about it? You gonna rip them back, or you gonna go back, get your gun, and shoot them? So I don't really have a question. It's more so an answer. It's more so a question. It's like, for me, the thing that I see in my community here in New Orleans as well as in Philly is we have a problem with gun violence, and what are we doing about it? And what's the root and the cause of it? Like, why are we killing each other in the streets? So that's something I want us to talk about here in the barbershop today.
Me, myself, just within the last year, I had to go to the funeral home to cut one of my dear friends, one of my good friends, good customers over 30 years. He lost his life over, like, maybe $72, $100 some odd dollars, which was a car part. Right? And the resolve of this particular incident had to do with he was given money to go get a part from AutoZone. You go to AutoZone, if they don't have the part, they tell you you have to order it. You pay for it to be ordered, they tell you it's 2 to 3 business days. 2 to 3 business days, okay, well, pay for the part, got the receipt. All right, well, I can't go fix the car. Go on carry. We were supposed to be fixing this car, thought that he was running out with his money. So he shows up to his mother's house and tell his mom, you don't get him here with my money, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. What you say, Alex, how you doing? And lo and behold, she calls her son and tell him to come on, bring him his money. Don't even worry about showing the receipt. Just give him his money for his part, don't worry about fixing his car. So his mom went with him to go knock on the door to give him his money. He knocked on the door, that guy opened up the door, get the F off my porch, bow, shot him in the chest in front of his mom. His picture is hanging up in the car. I have a wall in the corner that has everybody that has passed away. Most of them, some died of gun violence, some died of natural causes, but that one is one who was actual he was a fixture of the barbershop. If you needed anything, Bird would actually be Johnny on the spot. He lost his life in front of his mom. And she called him to say, come on, bring him his money. I'm gonna come down there with you. So for me, what does that do to me emotionally? Sad part is, I have gotten numb to it. It's been so many times, I've been to the funeral home so many times. How do you get desensitized to it? There's certain instances that it plays on me mentally, but how have I gotten to the point of acceptance? Right? A few years ago, there's a triple murder of a mother, son, and daughter. That was one I could not go to the funeral home to go cut. KD had to go do that. That kid had grew up here, used to sweep up for us, and his father killed him, his mom, and his sister. So those are the kind of things, and how I get to the point where I don't feel it. I don't know how. I don't know how, but because it's happened so often, it makes you just numb to it. Like, what do we do about that? That's one of the mental things that says, okay, am I that desensitized? Is it something that just doesn't bother me? It's just accepted. So, but I understand for me, I'm grown. How is that to a 14-year-old? How is that to the 13, 14, 15-year-olds who are out now committing those crimes?
I feel like it's kind of normalized. You got something to say about that?
Yeah, so I compare a lot of the psychology, even with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have what you need on the essential every day, what are you going to do to make that happen? And it's not as simple as somebody choosing violence, because we're not raised to hate, we're not raised to dislike, but like, if it's between me and you, I think most people in here would choose themselves. And that dives deeper into the aspect of community, because I come from a place where my mom and dad are so proud, because my mom grew up without shoes, and she always says it like, my son's going to be a doctor, my son's going to do this. But her growing up, there was no like, if she didn't have shoes, her neighbors didn't have shoes. So it was like no loneliness and lack of having, or like there was no like, oh, you're poor, you're this, or like if I was hungry, you were hungry too. And I think we have this idea now that like we think this there's utopian where like somebody's eating better than us, somebody's got it better than us, and like we fix these people and we put these labels on them and be like, oh, because they're from this era and they don't have this. We sort of create like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we can consistently encourage those, and we sort of put more factors and sort of like socioeconomic statuses and certain determinants in those people in those areas that sort of propel them on that path, rather than if somebody keeps telling you you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor.
You're going to believe it.
You're going to believe it. But if somebody says you're up to no good, like kids like that, and hey, you're up to no good. What? You're not going to that neighborhood. You're creating this mental construct, and in a sense, it's the same thing that keeps people boxed in these areas. Because you go back home, and you're like, yo, why do you talk like that? And it's not that I think I'm talking better. It's just like, I think I'm better. It's just that like I've been put in a place where I've been promoted to speak this way.
Right.
I've been promoted to act this way.
I've been rewarded for that.
Rewarded for that, exactly. And when we come to sometimes these communities, when we think of gun violence, is we're not rewarding our people for certain things. Simple answer could be take guns off the street. But if I wanted a gun, I could get a gun. That's not going to be the answer. The answer is just like investing yourselves in the community, and that's going to take people going in places that they don't want to go. People feeling scared. Personally, like a year ago, I was carjacked, gunpoint, and like after everything that happened, I was never like, man, like I want those kids to go to jail. It was like, what were these 15 and 14-year-olds going through that I wasn't going through at 14, 15 years old? Like I had it. I'm not saying I grew up like the Huxtables or I grew up like the Fresh Prince, but I grew up enough where I was like, mom and dad said, okay, this is how it's going to be.
Right.
So like I think we're just in our community, we're missing the extra hand that our parents sort of had, because they didn't grow up with everything that we had, but they had an extra hand for maybe the neighbor or the person down the street or the community. Like we don't work as a community all the time, and it's sort of like every person for themselves, and that turns into survival of the fittest, and then that turns into me against you.
Why
and
are
like,
we isolating ourselves?
we're isolating, and it's sort of like a self-selecting process.
And going on with what you talked about with just being isolated, I think it's interesting that social media has actually made us more isolated. Even though we can communicate with people more, we're kind of just projecting an image of ourselves, and there's not a lot of, okay, you need this, I need that. It's just more of like, you see somebody doing well, you feel like, I'm not doing as well. And it kind of like puts you down. So I think social media, even though we can talk with each other, it doesn't help us really connect to what's real. Just kind of an image of what everyone has going on.
Can I just say one thing? I think that's a very good point that you mentioned. I think we as a society have come to a point where we always want to project our best self. and we never want to share like what pains we're going through. Like if I get a new pair of shoes, now I want to tell everyone who doesn't have good shoes that their shoes suck, and like it's sort of like you're projecting your pain onto others, and then they just keep reflecting it to one another. And as a community, we end up just all putting ourselves down. And I really think that plays a big role into it. And Uzi also touched on a big point, the self-fulfilling prophecy. I think what people tell you, where you end up internalizing a lot. Like I remember like when I was younger, I would always like tell my parents the truth and stuff, and then they would just always believe that I was lying. And at some point I made a decision, I was like, they're gonna think I'm lying anyway, so I might as well lie. And that just takes you on a path. And I can only imagine people who like, you know, you're not stealing anything, and then every store you go into, someone saying, oh, you're a thief, oh, you're gonna want to even kill me, and then suddenly you find yourself fulfilling that role. Like, this is all people see me as anyway, so I might as well just do it. And I think that happens to a lot of people in our community. And so I think it's important for us to uplift each other, you know, speak positivity into each other, like, you know, your success, you know, you're going through a hard time right now, but I believe you can get there. And I feel like that's a affirmation that I've constantly got in my life that has allowed me to reach the point where I'm in med school. Even in med school, people who are not in med school are constantly telling me, bro, I see you doing your thing, you know, like keep going. And it's those moments I'm taking a hard test. I feel like I'm ready to give up, but I remember like, yo, there's other people like waiting on me to be succeeding. I start envisioning myself, you know, succeeding, graduation, being a doctor. When I come into the community and I'm like, hey, you want to get your blood pressure checked? And you know, my fellow brother is like, yo, I'm really proud of you for doing this. Like, that energizes me. But I feel like we've lost that as a community, just to be able to point each other and support each other. And I think that really goes a long way.
So how do we get it back then?
It starts right here, man. Like, all it takes is just one interaction. Like when you see someone like, hey, like I'm proud of you for doing your thing, you know. You're grinding, keep doing it. That's all it takes. Turn somebody's day around.
You said something that you said a lot of folks, they internalize that, and a lot of times when we think about internalization, and a lot of us dealing with trauma and we don't even know it's trauma. Dr. Baily, usually what does it look like when you kind of engaging with folks and you see the trauma? But how do you, what is advice that you can give and that you can impart upon us to allow us to see, hey, this is trauma that I'm seeing within inside me?
We talk increasingly now in psychiatry about how early trauma stays with you, as you say correctly, throughout the entirety of your life. We also live in a society that very often glorifies violence. We see a lot of violence, whether it's media or the like. We talk about it, and as some of my colleagues have stated, we didn't learn strategies that I think are violence-oriented, rather these so-called strategies that limit conflict resolution strategies. I think the young man with the left had stated earlier. I'll speak to the issue of gun violence. Been very involved in it for some time. Wrote 2 books on it, and a lot of the comments I think these comments are made are timely. I do think that there are too many guns quantitatively. 40 million guns in our society, 350 million people, so it's too easy to access a gun. I think we had a problem in New Orleans this year. A person was going to the football game and breaking into cars, really just kind of looking for guns in their glove box. Because then when a person has a gun, it changes the power dynamic between them and somebody else. You don't have to be big and strong to fight or the like. You pull out a gun, the person's afraid of you, and you feel like you can kind of get your way. Probably not a strategy that you normally would see, but you do see it in a community where people feel powerless. And powerless in so many other ways of life. If they don't think they can actually go to school, get education, get a good job, if they can't actually go to med school, as the young man did stated, or if their families or other colleagues are not patting you in the back saying, hey, you're doing well, or wishing you well, if you only really get glorified by engaging in violence, we have to see a lot more of that. I think there's some trauma to finish, I think is also so important, because we increasingly now know that the data shows very clearly that your brain actually changes organically, physiologically, when you're exposed to violence. We use this term adaptive plasticity. Our fancy word in psychiatry now, that your brain at many points has a fork in the road. It can develop strategies that I think are resilience oriented. You can develop ways I think to do better, to find non-violent strategies to handle conflict and to work through your problems. Or you can learn that really is the only way forward. It limits, I think, your cognitive process and your ability to think through strategies and technical activities that I think may decrease the risk you have to be violent towards somebody else. And you turn out, I think, and have an end result that's behaviorally, I think, adverse or abnormal. Not a problem, go ahead, it's all good. So I think that we have to talk to our community about these issues. I think it has to be a real world talk. Whether it's terms like plasticity or not, the reality is how you think and how you make decisions matters, and it changes based on how you've been acculturated early on. If you're in a society where you've been a victim of violence or you've witnessed it with your family or friends, that you would likely respond differently if others have not done so. It's not really a surprise. So society does a very poor job in mishandling young people by being overly, punitive toward them and thinking that they're just from a violent society, they're going to be violent. No, people can change and can do things differently or better if they're acculturated and trained with therapy to have other strategies moving forward that are nonviolent.
That's right. I do want to kind of poke the bear a little bit, and I want to make folks feel just maybe a little bit uncomfortable, if that's okay. We keep talking about trauma, the things that happen, and how it can be kind of that fork in the road. We kind of coined that as like average childhood experience. Oftentimes we've dealt with it. We don't even know it. We've normalized it, right? So I wanted folks in the room to kind of raise their hand if they've experienced some of these particular things. Raise your hand if you grew up in a single parent household. Raise your hand if you have a family member who has been subject to abuse. Raise your hand if you have been subject to abuse. That could be physical, it could be sexual, emotional, spiritual, it could be any type of abuse. Raise your hand if you have a family member who's been incarcerated. Raise your hand if you know somebody that has been incarcerated.
I'm done.
This is only a few. These are only a few markers of the ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences. And they say if you have an ACE score greater than 3, you are more likely to have a higher percentage of mortality. And it looks like most folks have at least an ACE score of 4. Just let that sink in. Things that is supposed to be something that will lead to your life being shorter. The majority of the folks in here have at least 4 of them. And it's like 10, 15, 20 of them. We could go all day. A lot of the different things we dealing with. You say what? Okay. A lot of the different things we dealing with, it started early. And it's changed the way we thought about things from an early start. Just me kind of being honest and talking about some of my stories, because sometimes when we talk about stories, we don't really understand the testimony until we hear other people's stories. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom was very sick. She was in military. She battled substance use. A lot of different things that she had to overcome. We had to overcome homelessness, food insecurities. I remember sometimes we would go on Tuesdays. The shelter is open on Tuesdays. They have the food pantry. We will walk 2 miles, grab our food, come all the way back because we couldn't afford it. We was on snaps and everything else and still couldn't afford it. This was even something that was just common to, just normal for us. This was the old community, right? So everybody was dealing with some type of variation of this. You understand what I'm saying? And so when we think about the things that we are all dealing with, I think oftentimes there's so much shame. And we dealing with things and we don't want to talk about these particular things, but we all dealing with the same type of adverse childhood experiences that dictate how we develop and how we grow in society. And when we think about community, you can't actually address community until you start to address the root of the community. I think it was Frederick Douglass that said it's easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken men. So how do we start to fix broken men? How do we start to raise strong children? We have to figure out where that source is. Anybody have any thoughts or any particular experiences on them own selves?
Adverse childhood experiences. If you go through the curriculum, they also show that there are certain jobs that are more you're more predisposed for success because of resilience. We need to inject resilience into the conversation of ACEs because we're here. There's a thing called BCEs, beneficial childhood experiences. All the studies show that if it shows, and that's when we go back to talking about the importance of community, it takes one adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. No matter how many ACEs they have, it takes one adult showing that they care. It takes one trip to the barbershop. What's the story, Stan? How many times do you give somebody a haircut before a job interview while you're mentoring to them in their ear?
That right there, that's Susan Waterboy, right? He go, yeah. I said, man, Lou need a job. He said, man, Susan Waterboy have a job fair tomorrow. He said, Lou, what you went to school for? the man went to school for computer engineering. He's in tech. Right? Literally, tech. He's just walking around. Just come and get a haircut. I'm like, but what? I say, man, listen, bro, go fill out the stuff tomorrow. Right? Go to the job fair. He goes to the job fair, fill it out. He says, Stan, I filled it out. I picked up the phone. I called Renee. I said, Renee, in the IT department, I got a kid just filled out an application. He went to the job fair. Renee said, what's his name? I said, man, you know him. It's Mr. Lewis' grandson. He said, Mailman Lou? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. He said, well, damn. He said, that boy graduated college already? I said, yeah. He said, well, ain't his dad a fireman? I said, yeah. He said, I thought he went to Florida. I said, yeah, but his son came back. Right? So Lou, Renee, we run the whole spiel. So Renee make one phone call, boom. Lewis called me back on Monday, says, damn, but he called me, bro. I'm going to work. So he started the job. But now, I'm thinking, okay, good. Lewis recited to me everything that I talked to the kid about real estate in the chair. Right now, today, Lewis been working probably 6 years, maybe 5, 6 years now. He's on his 6th house. So he took the advice.
That's community.
He took the advice, and he will tell you, my entire life changed in one trip to the barbershop. Right now, he has 6 rental properties, and he calls it 12 doors. And the reason he calls it 12 doors is because his focus was on getting multi-complexes doubles. So he have doubles. He have 6 doubles. And Dennis, he just bought the, what was it? He bought in Houston. He started in Houston.
Little space and time.
The barbershop made that difference for him, and it changed him. He would be the first one to tell you, but everything about me coming to the barbershop that day changed my life.
You kind of played that role of a mentor. You know what I mean? Like in its own kind of way.
Yep.
A lot of us don't have mentors though. I mean, raise your hand if you have like a mentor or somebody that you can kind of lean into. Okay.
Around older people since I was real young. And I find that most of my constructive foundation in life, that's where I got it from. But the difference now is a lot of young people won't stay still long enough for older people to give them.
Very true.
They call older people dinosaurs. You know, like the nickname is Onk and all that. You know, but you know, the main thing so far is this whole setting. This is really beautiful setting. I'm 78 years old. Okay, and I can remember the time, you see in a barbershop was your foundation of your community. You know, it wasn't just a gathering place so far as for a haircut. You know, it was an extension of the village. I was raised, I didn't realize that when I was real young, but I was raised in a village. They don't have that many black villages left no more in the city of New Orleans. They don't have it.
Do you think that's more because of how society is kind of shifted, or you think anything like Katrina or any other particular variable, gun violence, those type of things would be about it?
That's more, I think, because a lot of ways, I'm talking about black people. A lot of black people priorities has moved in the wrong way.
What part of the kind of that young generation right there, how have you been hearing stories from them on how community or how has it not supported them?
I think Jim's point is accurate. I guess my fear of the psychiatrist is that many youth in our community are disconnected from older persons who have the ability to share information, wisdom, advice. I think as well as the gentleman points out correctly, I think that if you have young persons who have been disconnected directly, they really are not connected, I think, indirectly through community in these settings. People talk a lot about institutions like church. When I was growing up, we went to the YMCA and swam. I was very fortunate to have a life where I had a father, but I also had a baseball coach that you spent a lot of time with. And it took becoming an adult to appreciate how much young people miss in not having that. I'm new to New Orleans, but I saw on news a year ago, what have you, Somebody was shot at a baseball diamond or whatever. They closed the whole diamond down. So many of the positive attributes, I think, for young persons going, being around a coach, learning conflict resolution, learning how to lose in fair play, learning the rules of the game. A lot of that is missed, and we wonder why I think many young adults, teenagers alike, don't follow the rules of society. They don't think those rules will apply to them when people have actually interface adversely or negatively toward them. I'd also say on the issue of violence, we've also had, because you mentioned the part about Katrina, the highest rate here in New Orleans of domestic violence that we've seen in many settings. It's a huge issue, yes sir. I think for our community. I think it's also very important because all too often men feel like, I mentioned earlier, not having any power, not really having a way out. So you have a relationship, you have a woman, for example, there's conflict on the job, conflict with your money, conflict with your ability to function. Otherwise, a man often needs some self-esteem by being able to provide for his family and the like. I see many individuals who don't seem to have that and don't see a way forward. If you don't have an education and that type of work, if you're not in a community where factories come to where you are, you can't move to, no offense, but overseas to work where the factories are, where you can get jobs without a college degree. There's a donut in our society, and many persons I think are kind of left out. And I think that's scary. Because those persons have a hard time figuring out a way to succeed and survive. I think in the American economy and our society, I see a lot of that unfortunately here in New Orleans. And those are the stories that people tell. But when you go to see a psychiatrist, I'll end by saying, people often start in the middle of the story. Now, you want to be a psychiatrist, I'll share this with you as well. I'm often trying to figure out, where did the story begin? What's the part that you're leaving out that you already told me that led to maybe some early exposure to trauma, some early exposure to violence? But the big issue is, I think, a lack of a concept that you can survive and win the way life works here now. That issue, I think, of isolationism is scary, and we have to, I think, address it as a community much better than we're doing right now.
Reflection of what we learned from our parents or whoever was our guardians. So those coping skills end up becoming, as you grow, a part of your inner child, right? They reflect what you experience in the home. And so as a African American male, that's the experience that I can speak to. I've had to assess to myself, whenever I feel frustration or I feel defeat or I feel a sense of loss, when those coping mechanisms manifest themselves, those subconscious things where I'm beating myself up, I'm negatively speaking down on myself, and the traumas of when let's say, somebody in my life had spoken down on me when I made a mistake. I've had to assess and say, like, that's my inner child crying out to say, like, oh no, I actually just need support in this moment, or I need to reorganize my algorithm and how I assess my failure and make it a positive, versus just relying on the negative and leaning towards that side, and then my coping mechanisms come out to be things that support my vices, negative things like resorting to potentially alcohol or drug abuse, or even violence, lashing out. Those coping mechanisms usually are learned behaviors, and we have to unlearn those behaviors to have positive coping mechanisms that allow us to grow out of whatever situation that forces us into.
Well said.
I wanted to make a comment about how, real quick, my name is Kwame Kara. I'm the founder and CEO of Bear Health. We're a startup company based here at Xavier, committed to maximizing health in the Black community. Is anybody familiar with the Gini coefficient? Anybody ever heard of the Gini coefficient? So we know that our environment shape our behavior, right? We all are aware of this. So the Gini coefficient is a number that measures relative inequality, right? So in any geographical area. So if you look at New Orleans, a neighborhood in New Orleans compared to another neighborhood in New Orleans, you can see the relative inequality. This number predicts male-on-male violence greater than anything else in the world. It makes up for 80% of why men become angry, because they don't see an opportunity to go from wherever they are to the same level of status that they see around them. And so as a consequence, we start to become angry and we take it out on each other. Now, what do we do about that? What do we do with that anger and that energy and that passion? Instead of turning it on each other, how can we turn that into what we're talking about in here to create more positive futures for ourselves? Because the energy is there, right? But you got to stop putting it on each other.
But like you said, there's positive coping skills, and then there's what we call negative or maladaptive coping skills. Mm-hmm. And there's so many maladaptive coping skills all over the place, right? Like we thinking about, like you said, alcohol. There's alcohol stores on every corner. Sometimes now they open on Easter now. That was like, what's going on? Like, that wasn't even a thing. You know, everybody can hold a gun, but everybody, you know, deserves the right to protect themselves. But sometimes folks is getting guns, 13, 14 years old, and they, you know, they killing themselves, accident or on purpose. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different things that's out there. So how do we address that, right? Because before you can get to a positive coping skill, you got to avoid the negative coping skills.
Somebody's got to just be able to be
I'll tell you
open.
what,
I'm
man,
sorry.
speaking of alcohol sales, I mean, this New Orleans.
Well, real quick.
No. Go ahead.
The deal is in New Orleans, which is one of the things that does plague each of our communities throughout. If you look at other places, there is not liquor stores on every corner. It's no secret that liquor stores plague every black community. They are all over everywhere. And what it does, because it's there, means, okay, we just fester and go straight to it. Right? But lo and behold, what are you creating in the eyes of the young that look up? Right? And I said this all the time years ago. I used to say, you know, the idea of being a product of the environment opposed to an environment's product. Right? If you only see the winos, and you only see the guys who stand around and drink beers, you only see the guys who sit around who don't work. Every positive and well-educated person, every successful person leaves as they attain the education, and as they attain a job that makes it the level of success that we're looking for. If everyone leaves, what do you leave in that spot? Right? So I was always one to say, I'm not leaving, I want to fix where I am. Right? But at the time, it was just me who felt that way. If the level of success based on the people that I was around, I have a lot of successful people who grew up with me, but they're all gone. Right? But to sustainably stay around and see, well, this is what I got to look up to. Right?
The other thing for that, another thing, something happened with people who are on the corner drinking wine and using drugs.
It caused them to be that way.
Caused them to be there.
That's right.
That's one thing. I say I want to drink every day because something happens to me growing up. Because my dad wasn't there. Because I saw this, that, the third. Until we're able to speak about our trauma without being judged and say, hey, we're all dealing with the same stuff. We all gotta find a solution together. I think that's how we can come together and say, okay, we're not gonna cope with the alcohol. We're all hurting. We all want something better.
So you think that we should do what we should to support the community? What are you kind of trying to say?
We need some platform to be able to speak about our trauma openly. Is what I'm trying to say.
I was going to say that one of the advantages I think of being in psychiatry, organized psychiatry, is to really share with persons when they're telling us that what they need is what we do. So what this gentleman is saying is exactly what psychiatrists do. You go behind closed doors and you listen to someone more than talking. You ensure them confidentiality. So the safety is that you're not going to share this with their cousin or relative or friend. But the person has to get those things off their chest. I think what you're saying is so true. I think that many of the arguments made very well by Antonio in the group today. It's hard to find someone who hadn't had that level of trauma. And it's very hard to find somebody who had that level of trauma, emotional trauma early in life, who's having trouble right now. All too often that is exactly what the case may be. And I love your point. The way to really address it is to find some setting to do that in. One of the problems I think in our community is because of stigma and the fear of going to the doctor in general or the psychiatrist particularly, because folks are going to be humiliated by it or kind of laugh at us. We don't avail ourselves or don't allow ourselves to get treatment that we need. So I've often said to people, if you're having chest pain, you go to the cardiologist for a heart attack. If you had a broken leg, I got a daughter who's an orthopedic surgeon, you go and see the orthopod or what have you. This idea there's something different about black people than other people, and you can't see a psychiatrist, really prevents us from getting care that actually was needed and would help prevent all of this generational trauma that very often leads to repetitive aspects of violence.
Right. So how many folks in here got you got somewhere to say?
Yeah. I think kind of along those lines, like, I think even in negative situation, your mindset can definitely change how you learn from the situation. Because for me growing up, like, if I have like any family members that have like polysubstance abuse or anything, even as a young kid before anyone told me anything, just seeing how they were, I said, okay, they already took this path for me and I don't have to take it, and I don't want to end up this way. So that can also teach you a lot. And so a lot of times I feel like when we talk about how people grow up in a single parent household or anything else, like, there's learning points from each other. Although I was in a single parent household, I had many different parents. I saw like positive parts of like my uncle. He was very patient, but there's other things that I didn't want to take from his personality. So from every coach, from every teacher, from even TV shows, I'll just take bits and parts of people and kind of create my own character, or like things that I saw that were positive or things that I saw were good. And sometimes I feel like as a young kid, if you don't already have that, if someone can kind of teach you how to use your situation to learn from it, it honestly helps a lot. Because even like all the negative things I've seen, I felt like it helped me not take those same journeys, and those people have already learned for me, so I don't have to do those things. And I feel like those things are kind of difficult until like someone makes the decisions to kind of go down the same path. If you already have like any type of substance abuse in your family, I feel like even going to college, like it kind of endorses like recreational drugs or anything recreational. But I don't think there's any such thing as recreation for certain people depending on your family history. Like for me, I was like, I'll never drink because I have people in my family that struggle with like any type of like polysubstance abuse. So that's something I just won't even put in a situation. I think a good way of like teaching young kids is like, you don't have to change your situation, you just have to change how you're learning from it.
That kind of made me think about something that I heard from James Baldwin. He said education is our priority. How can we resist exploitation when we don't have the tools to understand it? And I think in mental health, this is the opportunity for us to figure out how to understand it. But quick. How many of us, I think we learn a lot of the things from our therapists, from psychiatrists, but how many of us in here actually have a therapist? Oh, there's a few of y'all in here.
I don't have a therapist. The barbershop is my therapist.
The barbershop is your therapist?
It's fine though. It's fine to go get happy.
I agree. I come out of here feeling good all the time. It's like, but
outlook on my life and my experience.
the folks in here feel like they need a therapist?
Yeah, here's the thing. Excuse me for talking my mouth full.
You all good? We gotta get the munchies.
In most instances, the acknowledgement of saying, I need a therapist. That's a mountain to climb. That's the hardest part. Right?
You're saying it.
As we get kids who come in and say, I'm going to go to school and major in psychiatry. My question to them is, what is the end game? Understand that within urban communities, number one, black folks don't like to admit nothing's going wrong enough for them to go see a therapist.
That's right, yeah.
Number two,
that comes from when our generation. If somebody had a mental problem, they would call me crazy. And that turned a lot of people from mental health.
Exactly.
Didn't take it serious. It was a shameful thing for the family. Somebody had a mental problem.
Right.
You said they didn't take it serious.
No, look, not in our era. Didn't take it serious. We figured, well, that boy is crazy. That girl is crazy.
Or
kind of left it at that.
They were quick to say, are you on drugs?
Rather than say, well, it was need some help. Need some help, We never looked at that point, to say that.
We don't.
Let it go.
We don't like to face reality.
And now, with things are right now, people really need it right now. Like you said, it's a stigma behind it. Nobody wants to feel like they're crazy. But you don't have to say, well, insane crazy. Just feel like you feel like you're out of place where you used to be. And people don't admit that.
Need a tune-up.
Don't admit it.
That's all it is.
They need help just like for your high blood pressure.
Yeah, I'll jump in by saying, again, you're psychiatrists and we are. I think we learn as much as we go to a barbershop as we share. And what you just said is what I've been trying to say for 30 years in my business. Once you can get somebody to understand the difference between being psychotic and really impaired, what unfortunately people call being crazy, going to the emergency room, not hearing straight in the light or whatever, the really, really bad stuff, from the regular stuff that everybody else experiences because of trauma and being a bit depressed, having some anxiety, then a whole lot of people over here who need a little help can't get it because they're thinking that all psychiatry is the worst form of psychiatry. That's a story that I think we've got to do a better job telling as black psychiatrists.
I think 1 in 5 people have some type of mental health issue, illness issue, however.
Hit the huge issues. But that was about as horrible a government-based aspect
At that time, we thought it was a good thing.
of what we call structural racism that exists. Because disproportionately adversely affected black communities. Folks forget that didn't happen in rural communities in West Virginia and Iowa and Nebraska. If you were rural and poor to have a job, the man could actually stay in the house. So I think that a lot of the struggles that black men have are our own. People love talking about that part. But we got to acknowledge the parts that are somebody else's responsibility, and the part very often that the government takes, I think, a role to play. That's a remarkable point. And what's so bad about it, how long it lasted, and how then it becomes kind of ingrained in people's lives. And then later on, you fight about it. Right, you fight about whether you're a man and you don't actually have a woman that you are engaged with or married to, that kind of business. It affects your kids and all 9 yards. I'm impressed how many people say today that they grew up in a household with a single mother and not a father, and how successful a lot of other people are. I mean, that single mother was really wearing 2 hats, doing a whole lot, and they deserve to give credit for that.
That's right. I think too, when we think about kind of like that dynamic, you know what I'm saying, single parents or whatever the case may be, but sometimes we do have, you know, co-parenting going on, or we have marriage and we have like a nuclear family. But how do we feel like that relates? How do we feel like some of the issues that we deal? Because oftentimes, I think James Baldwin said this, and I think Angela Davis had like a whole conversation about this way back when. But James Baldwin was basically like, yo, like us as black men, we got so much to deal on the outside. When we come home, sometimes we just don't got it. We don't have it to be able to provide that sense of our best selves towards you. Angela Davis basically came back and was like, well, we deserve the best of y'all, and we don't get that, we get the less of y'all. And so what does that look like in terms of that dynamic, how the world or structural racism or structural dynamics really impact us as men, black men, and how that now translates to our relationships with our women and our wives and significant others?
I think as men, we have a responsibility to assess when we are able, like you said, when we're not our best version of ourselves. Like, we come home and it's like, I just don't got it, and you know, work was hard for me. The world is difficult on us, and that. But we have a responsibility not to bring that part of our lives into the home where it impacts our wives and impacts our children.
But how do we do that? Is what
how
I'm saying.
do we do that? It goes back to the the inner child and the assessing what our environment is doing to us or trying to do to us. Because if you know better, you're always gonna do that. If you know what is actually actively happening to you, and you're aware that when I'm at work and my boss is yelling at me because I didn't turn in this thing on time, or I had this error in my report, etc., etc. Those things are an issue with the workplace, but isolating the stress, right? Keeping it in one location and not bringing it over. That's like something that you have to actively assess for who you are.
And even if you can't do that, at least communicating makes things a lot easier. Because when you live in your head, nobody knows what's going on. So if you can at least say, hey, you know, I had a hard day, I just need like a few minutes to decompress. Just communicating is like the first step to make things a lot easier for yourself.
So just alternate between. I think too.
For the last 2 hours, and you see what our concerns are. You have really diligently been paying close attention. I've been watching. So you listening, you soaking it up. What's your opinion on the things that you now see that we deem as important? The things that you see that are concerns of ours, that you would probably at some point say, damn, I ain't never think that they would be feeling like that, right? Because what happens is, from a female perspective, this is just me, I don't want to quote everybody, but our thoughts and our feelings get completely dismissed by women in some instances. And it's not that I'm pointing the blame, but we've gotten used to it. We get used to it to the point where it quiets us down in reference to expressing or talking about or going into any of those things that actually really deem like negligently important in our minds of how to and what to, right? So now that you've listened in all of that time, give me just a synopsis of what you think. And I'm coming to you next because you've been watching too.
Wait, so you mean like
just overall, the things that you now, no, I'm talking about from today, the things that you've heard us talk about. Have any of that ever crossed your mind that those are the things that concern us as black men? Did you think that any of that stuff concerned us? Honestly.
I mean, I have a brother, so.
I was just saying, what do you think? I mean, you probably didn't talk to you, but just go ahead.
No, he doesn't talk much, but
you know why he doesn't talk much?
But I feel like as women, especially in the black community, I feel like we do need to create spaces where the men of color feel comfortable talking about their feelings, expressing themselves. We could be a part of the problem if we are unapproachable, or we don't create that space where you feel safe to share. that we may create for other people, and so you feel dismissed, you feel left out, you feel unheard. So I think there's definitely things that we could do. Part of it is us knowing that there is a problem, and by being here right now and hearing that there is a problem and this is your concern, I feel like moving forward, I feel like I could do better myself.
Well, thank you so much.
And I can encourage other women, to do those things as well.
That's broke. That's see what I'm saying?
I do want to touch on one thing you were talking about. You're talking about like Lyndon B. Johnson and this whole welfare, and it incentivized like black women to kick black women out of the home. And I think that was such a bad thing for the black community. You mentioned like you think he was good intentioned or whatever. I don't know. I feel like in a way he knew really well what he was doing. Like when you kick the black man out of the family, that just weakens the household.
Yeah.
So I think that in itself, like not having these nuclear families, not having these black men in the homes, like that in itself is a problem. I think as far as women and what we can do and supporting this and bringing families back together is, I think we do need to lift our kings up and give them these places, safe places. Don't be down their neck as much, I guess. But yeah, we have to bring that family back if we want to better our community in general.
I'll just say one thing that I wanted to pick up on the conversation that y'all were just having about having a third place. I guess as women, when we communicate with each other, it's very easy for us to have those deep conversations and for us to get to the root of the things, and it's okay to be emotional and it's okay to get to that. And I guess I'm learning a little bit more about what brotherhood looks like for y'all. I know I have men in my life who they have friends for certain things, and women are the same way, but there's only certain people they feel like they can be that open to. And I feel like as a woman, there are a lot of people I feel like I can be open to and it would be okay. And so I understand that dynamic's a little different. I guess what I'm trying to understand more is how as a woman can I provide that space, because sometimes there's a wall and there's a barrier. There's a perception that I feel like especially black men feel about how they have to present themselves, and what can we do to allow there to be, again, like you all said, a safe space, a place where you feel like you can be vulnerable and you won't be judged, or we won't think of you less.
Yeah. Nah, but a lot of times I found that to be one of my Achilles heel with my girl. It wasn't modeled in my home. I'm a first generation Nigerian, and so my dad, he's an awesome dad, but he wasn't very emotive. He didn't express his emotions. And so obviously that's modeled within my relationship. And so oftentimes I would deal with a lot and not be able to process it well, and then my girl would see it and feel it, but I wouldn't be able to communicate. And oftentimes it caused schisms between me and her. And so over time, over the years of me relating with her, I had to learn how to, the same way I easily call up my cousin Max and talk about something, I have to get that level of comfortability with my fiance, be able to talk about those things, be able to process it. Otherwise, it'll just keep eating at me. And so as men, what are some effective ways, or what would you like seeing, whether from significant other or sister, or any of your relationships, your female relationships, what do you feel like would be effective to bring that out of you, to allow you to express your emotions in a more comfortable way? What do you think are some things that you would like your female counterparts, your significant others, to create that space?
I really never asked my girl for anything or for support. I just to listen. I don't really even need you to say anything back. Just listen.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes just listening
to hear what you're saying.
Listening to hear what you're saying and process what you're saying, but at the same time, he said, I don't really need you to say that. Well, here's the difference. I just did an exercise in the back. Sometimes non-verbally, there's a lot being said, but you haven't been taught to read it. Okay. So even though you're speaking about it, I don't want to put it on your mind, because the deal is the stuff that you read, the stuff that you take non-verbally, may not be what you're looking for.
Okay.
Right? So the deal is express yourself, attorney. Just she there, look this way. Okay. I'm serious. I'm dead serious, because sometimes facial expressions and gestures speak more words. You hear say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Right. Well, nonverbal communication. I mean, when you are pouring out some stuff that's on your mind, and the receptiveness that you're looking at ain't giving you, it doesn't match. It's almost as if the battery got even extra empty.
There's no connection.
The zero as a connection of, well, all right then. It's almost as if she looked at you and said, well, sorry you feel that way. Right? It's not no compassion for what you got going on. It's like, Or if you don't get to a punk ass, then, right? And you think I'm trying to hear that right? That's the kind of stuff it pops in your head when you're watching. Although you're expressing yourself, but you're really looking for affirmation.
Let me flip that on the head. So you talk about a negative response that you get, whether verbal or non-verbal. Speak to positive.
Right.
Like
so
speak to something
understanding
positive.
what you see, although look at it as, okay, the acceptance of you being able to speak. Like you said, what gives you that vessel to feel comfortable enough?
Yeah.
How do you get to that place that you're that comfortable enough to say, I'm gonna hold this conversation with my girl. But if you don't get what you're looking for, right? How you then digest what you just received after pouring all of that out? How do you handle that part of it? So even trying to look at it as a positive, when I've gained a sense of comfort, I'm able to talk to you about it. What am I looking for after that? That's my question.
I give you positive. I don't like having to ask her for it, but I love to see my head is bald. She gets to rubbing my head while I'm talking to her. Like, I'm good. I'm like, I feel like I can tell her everything.
Yeah.
But also like, to what, speaking for, the way he's speaking on, I think a lot of times we feel judged when we start sharing these things with our partners. Understanding that they're going through a lot as well, but also it's like, I feel like either sometimes they feel like in some way responsible for the things that you're going through, and so sometimes it feels like there's this kind of sense of like getting defensive when it doesn't have anything to do with them, and like you said, like really just need like to listen and say like it's gonna be okay, or like you can do it, really, but yeah, like you don't always have to. I think it goes the same vice versa, because when we were saying the same thing, like, oh, you always trying to fix all my problems, when we talk to you, and that was big with me, like not giving a solution for everything.
Yeah.
Because that's not what they want.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just came into this. It was a very interesting conversation. I think one of the big things that black men struggle with is establishing their humanity early on. Masculinity is taking a huge toll. And you talked about something which is, I went to Howard University, so I've heard about the effects of the Green Deal and Lyndon B. Johnson, who had good intentions. But what has happened in that moment, at the time after slavery, black men took it upon themselves. They saw it as an honor taking care of the house, and the government effectively took that away. So we have this like weird emasculation, and to do that, I've seen, even within myself, an overcompensation from black men to prove their masculinity, which in turn has almost had them forget that they're still human. First, they should be fighting for the humanity. When you look at the civil rights movement, it was black men fighting to say, I'm a human being. See me as a human being. You don't really see that anymore. It's more so, I'm a big bad man. I'm a provider, but you don't see the humanity. So I think when communicating with women, when you haven't really established your humanity, one of the big things is you don't really establish your senses to like read the room. For example, I like to say, you can't say to your partner, my hand hurts, when your partner's hand has been chopped off. It's not going to be well received. So understanding that your woman is going through a lot, establishing your humanity, thereby also establishing hers. I think it flows, it creates communication to allow a more unified response to whatever you're dealing with. But the first step is to look deep within and say, I'm a human being, I will react like most human beings will react to stress. I'm a human being, I understand how I act to certain emotions, I'm a human being, and I guess whatever happens to me actually matters. And if it matters to me, then it matters to my spouse, and therefore communication can really just kick off. So that's what I would think. So.
That's true. I love what you shared as far as whether it's society causes us to overcompensate, or we've been conditioned to overcompensate based upon the different structures that we feel, whether it's racism, whether it's not being validated by our peers or by our families. And so how do we effectively be vulnerable to our significant others or to our loved ones without overcompensating, if you will, as far as like with those pressures of society? How do we balance that tension?
Right. Say that question again. I missed it.
So, for sure. So how do we balance the the proclivity or the desire to overcompensate, you know, from the pressures of society as men, with effectively being able to be humble and vulnerable, to be able to establish our men. How do we balance those two tense things that we deal with as men?
It's very delicate, number one. In my own opinion, the balance of humbleness in reference to seeking validation from some of the things that you deem as important, or we feel is important. That validation has to come in a connection, as if when he spoke earlier, he said they have to have a basis of connection. Right? And to actually really get the validation of that, you can't have somebody's mentality on St. Charles and Napoleon and we over here on forever.
Yeah.
They have to have some common ground of understanding that meets in the right place. Right? So that growth of reaching that actual level of comfort, of vulnerability to speak it out, attain that validation of, okay, it's okay to speak, it's okay to feel like you feel, okay, how do we assess and what do we want to do to make that better? Right? Getting to that sense of comfort for me is one of the things that it plagues a lot of people. It plagues a lot of relationships. I mean, point blank, you know, after so long, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna bother. Seriously, you laughing? I'm dead serious. Because some things you say, I just rather deal with this shit myself. Right? I don't need the excess pressure of that. I got enough pressure going on. I'm mentioning this shit over there. Man, it's gonna go from the size of, you know, it's gonna go from the arena to the Superdome. So, you know, it's not that you don't have a connection or you don't have the validation from your partner. It's just that some things could be interpreted way different than what you perceive them to be when it goes to someone else. Right? So their perspective or their comprehension of what it is you're trying to explain, what it is that you're trying to convey, that really explains or shows what your feelings are towards something. I'm looking at and I'm hoping that somewhere that understanding, just as she said earlier, now that I know, hopefully we can now practice and try to be better. And that part of it, we have no control over.
Yeah.
We don't.
That's good, bro. That's good.
I was gonna say, like, I actually, and this is just based on my experience, I do think that a lot of it is on the women for getting men to be vulnerable, right? Men's expectations drive women's behavior. Women's expectations drive men's behavior. If we don't feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, if that doesn't lead to ultimately what we want, then we're not gonna do it. And in my experience, when I've opened up, when I've become vulnerable, I don't think she liked me as much no more. I ain't gonna lie. I'm just being real. That's been my experience.
As deemed as,
and I know that that's a societal influence, but so that's why I do think that the women got to do a lot of work on their own perspective as it relates to men being vulnerable. If we're actually going to consistently be vulnerable, otherwise we're not. If what we want is then cut off, then we not.
Society do a pretty good job putting that wall up. Who's gonna care about your feelings if you don't care about mine? At that point, like you told me that you don't care about my feelings. At that point, when most of the connection that was there is gone.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you know, the one safe place that I thought I had is gone.
Yeah.
You know, outside of like any family relationships or anything that I have, the one person I thought that I would be able to share with, who I allowed to share with me, has said, "Oh, you need to man up. You shouldn't have these feelings. You know, you're being a little too sensitive." And in that standpoint, you come into a place where the man is vilified for being himself, for being his true authentic self, the person that he should be allowed to be true and authentic with.
Yeah.
And so I think your point is 100% valid. Like, if you can't validate, if you can't understand and acknowledge that I have feelings, whether or not you agree with them or not, you know, there's no longer a path for us, because you kind of decrease the amount of longevity that we have, because there's opportunity for you to grow, for me to have that conversation. I need you to be able to acknowledge and be able to understand that I do have feelings, and I want to talk about my feelings as well as talking about yours. That's how you grow. But if you don't think that at this point in time that that's a commitment that you can make, then let's not keep ourselves in a place where, you know, there's continual cycle of trauma where I don't get to allow myself to be my true authentic self. And so that's also another thing that a man has to be able to explain to a woman, on the same way that a woman needs to be able to explain that, you know, I have places to grow, I have places to improve, I should change my mindset. The man should be able to require those things of them, because
they require so much out of us, and as expected, the same requirement should be of them. So I think that's the point.
I agree 100%. I think one other thing that we make a mistake of is thinking that we know how to do it. Right? Like it's never been modeled. Right? To be for men to be vulnerable to women and women to know how to receive that. It's never been modeled, right? And even if it was probably modeled in two different ways. If you did see it like in your parents' household. So like, I'm really a big advocate for coaching. Like you said, practice, like coaching, mental health coaching, counseling, like couples counseling. Like that stuff, I think is like required because we don't know how to do it. To think that we can get into a relationship, have a successful relationship without any previous experience or example is just unrealistic to me. And so I think that like that's going to be a good part of the solution is having like a coach. There's just a relationship coach. Ain't even got to be a counselor. Nothing necessarily has to be going on, but just like somebody that's there to guide your relationship that you're doing for the first time or second time. And most of your experience has been a failure as it relates to relationships. So why not get somebody to help you and guide y'all through that?
Well, what I'm hearing is like, how do we develop effective ways to reciprocate emotional safety? But that's what we want. We want to be able to open up to our partners and have that received. And also be able to be in a space where we make space as well too. Because something my fiance told me that like hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I'm in med school. No matter what med school you went through your own level of adversity. So I was going through a lot of trying times, and she was taking it. Like she literally was like my pillar. And then one day she was just like, "Hey James, you know, sometimes I feel like you go through so much that you don't make room for me." And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because like I'm dealing with adverse things in society. I'm dealing with, you know, being the first physician in my family, and this is somebody that's been holding me up. But at the same time, I didn't have the same awareness to see like, hey, because she's been holding me up, I haven't cultivated that space for her to be vulnerable, for her to open up, for her to share about what's going on. And so how do we, as men, when we open up, when we find that safe space, how do we cultivate that reciprocity for what like our women are opening up to us as well too? And so, yeah, how do we do that?
I think the big thing is, again, circle back to your previous question and to this one. First, you have to validate your humanity towards yourself. So a lot of times when we experience something, we act without understanding what we're experiencing. That you're taking away humanity from yourself. You're not a robot. You have algorithms in place through your genetic code, through the way you're raised, that will elicit a certain response. And when you like validate your humanity, you say, I respond this way. Therefore, you're able to have a more measured response. And another thing is, when you're speaking to your partner, you validate their humanity too. So you speak to their humanity and not their gender. And I think that's where a lot of us fail. You speak to their humanity and not their gender. So a woman or man, if they experience a specific trauma, there's a predictable trauma response. When we look at a woman through the lens of their woman, sometimes it attenuates what a natural response should be, and we get confused. So if a woman looks at you and thinks you may leave, naturally what do people do when they think they have something precious that's going to be stolen from them? They react violently. And we say, I'm using this example, this woman's acting violently, not saying a human is worried that something valuable is leaving. So I think that's the way we create it. We look at our partners and validate their humanity and speak to their humanity and not their gender or whatever gender roles they have. And we start from there, and I think communication can really go from that.
I think that's really important. I go to therapy regularly, and when I first started going, one of the things my therapist would always ask me when I like expressed something or told her experience, she would say, "Where do you feel that at in your body?" Like, I don't know. I'm mad. Like, I don't like this. But what she got me to realize is that, you know, in expressing how we feel, what we need, a lot of times we're not even truly aware of how we are feeling or what it is we are needing, because we're not aware of our bodies. And so usually we don't become aware until we explode, you know. And then when we explode, it's too late. But like, if you know like the signs before that, like, okay, like my heart is starting to beat a little bit faster, like I'm sweating a little bit more, like my chest is feeling tight or something like that, my shoulders are feeling tight, those are all things that my therapist led me through and helped me to kind of like get a handle of like where I actually was emotionally at like any point, you know, in a conversation or throughout the course of the day. I know how I'm feeling, you know, how my body feels when I'm feeling good now, and not just, you know, like I'm laughing, because I think a lot of times, especially for men, it's like either we laugh or like we pissed off about something, you know what I'm saying? But like being able to experience that full range of emotions that makes you human in the first place, I think, you know, being able to understand that is going to help you be able to express yourself to your partner in a way that is calmer and is more humanizing to both yourself and to them.
Building off of that.
Over there.
Yeah.
Because you will have that initial physiological response no matter what you do. Or taking it over there.
Before we get to a breaking point, to reiterate that. What are some effective tools that we can implement to be able to healthy and effectively process before we get to our breaking point?
Because not every emotion you can define all the time. But it's always good to try and at least put a label on it as best as you can.
For sure.
Not every time you can. So the idea is awareness, right? The body awareness is very important.
Yeah.
I know for myself, when I feel a sense of like anxiety, my breathing shortens. My breaths per minute becomes significantly less.
Yeah.
I find myself reaching for my phone or for something, some sort of cheap dopamine source.
Yeah.
Just to get my mind off of things.
Yeah.
Especially the thought just randomly appears in my mind. So recognizing those small things usually helps.
Okay.
And then defining it for myself out loud. Like, out loud saying like, oh, I am stressed. Or this thing is causing me anxiety.
Yeah.
Or I don't feel comfortable with this idea or the thought of this idea.
Yeah.
So those are small ways.
Okay.
Of course. But you asked the question one more time.
What are some effective tools or strategies that we can do or implement the process before we get to our breaking point?
Of course, communication.
Okay.
Right? And having a person to communicate to. I believe everybody needs therapy.
Yeah.
I think everybody in life should have a person they can go to.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not always feasible.
Yeah.
Right? But even if you don't have that person you can go to, if it's a journaling tool, right? Something where you can write these things down.
Yeah.
If it's it's affirmations, right? It's just simple reprogramming, reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Positive reinforcement, cognitive behavioral therapy. Those small things you can do for yourself.
Yeah.
Those are ways you can prevent the what's it called? The action potential, if you want to say, like going over the edge.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah. Now I like what you mentioned about journaling. A lot of times, that's what communication does. Like when we're going through those stressors, those negative stressors, they're bottled up in us. So that's why it comes out physiologically. But that's through an angst, whether it's through the body. And so even if you don't have somebody physically to communicate with, you got a pen and a paper. Like you can write out those thoughts, whether they're negative or otherwise, and that's releasing from you. Well, they get real small when you see them on paper.
Yeah, they get real small.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, this thing I'm thinking about. Oh, it was just one sentence.
Yeah.
That was there, and then as you write it down, a sense of relief kind of falls over.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. And that, going back to your awareness, like when you're able to journal, and whether that's once a week or 3 times a week, you're able to go back and reflect and catalog. Okay, when I was very stressed, you know, I had this response. Okay, I'm able to identify, oh, this was going on, and this is how I reacted. And so as you go on, you can start to be able to map out that progression. You know, as time goes on, once you journal, those big problems become real small once you're able to look at them like over time.
Because he wanted me to step outside.
Gotcha.
So I know he went.
Gotcha. I'll let him know.
All right.
Yes, sir. My fault. Yeah. And so we've talked about a multitude of topics as we've had throughout this time in a barbershop, on and off, you know, kind of modeling what LeBron James did in the shop. And so it's great to have.
Time out, but we was doing this shit way before LeBron.
Big facts, big facts. But to what society saw, but you're right.
To what they believe.
Yeah. You know, we're thankful for the OGs, like as he, you know, rightfully said. That's also offered this safe space to be able to process, you know, in an unofficial way. But you know, it's great when we have the psychiatrists in here that, you know, have the 30 years of experience and, you know, sharing those gems as well too. And so we're great to have this time to talk about the different stresses that we had in society and really just break down the stigma to mental health and being able to really just accept that, like, hey, you know, it's okay not to be okay. You know, we go through big traumas when we see people with different mental illness, but there's also small traumas over time that not dealt with that can have the same impact. And so as we bring this time to a close, you know, we don't want the healing and we don't want the processing to stop here. And so take these tools that you've learned, take these conversations, and continue to put those and communicate those within your families, and continue to patronize your local barbershops, you know, people that's been doing it for a while. So we're thankful for you and your barbershop creating this safe space, and we're thankful for all of y'all coming out and making the time and space.
Care and how to manage his home life going into the last years of his life. That kind of was the real catalyst for me to join medicine.
So Dealin is the people that are around you, young people. Like, never be afraid to see them. Like little kids, like Kyle, sitting in the back.
Yeah.
Putting over the sparks of the cup. Simple conversation. Simple talk.
Yeah.
Gauge their interest. Right? Something started for you right now. They don't have much that starts this with them. Right? They just look at Kyle. I mean, not to be talking about your son, but right now, that is what is going on.
Yeah.
Right? So being engaged, regardless if it's a total stranger, I don't care if you're sitting in a barbershop, I don't care if you're walking through the mall, high five a kid and say, hey man, what's up? People did not see people that look like and resemble them as a doctor.
Yeah.
The biggest example is my nephew is 34 years old now. I think 34, 34. Dr. Bucci and Dr. Thomas Odo, both of them come in together at the orthopedic surgeons. Thomas was here one day with his tank top on, he went to the gym. He got tattoos, he got basketballs, he got, you know, twists. And just holding a conversation, you know, my little nephew was like, hey, bro, I hear you keep on talking this stuff about it in the hospital, but what you do? I said, man, I'm orthopedic surgeon. My nephew go, man, get out of here, man. Go ahead, man. Like, nah, but he really is a surgeon. So Bucci said, man, I just took 19 bullets out of a kid the other day. Right? He said, man, if I ever look up when I'm on the table and I look up and I see one of these two, man, y'all better get me out of here, bro. That man, that guy, he got ballers life dreams. Him, you know, just, he said, man, that man got braids. But y'all ain't no doctors. So just think about what that says. We are not used to, and we should be, right? The acceptance and understanding of what we now have as an expectation of our own in the medical field that produces the right kind of care for us, that produces the right kind of nurturing for us in medicine. Because for years, we have not received the right kind of treatment.
For sure.
I mean, literally for years, you may get pushed to one medication and those other folks on the other side of town, they get pushed in the direction of education rather than medication. Good afternoon, Stan speaking. What's up? What time you get off? You get 5:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the evening. Walk. Makes a difference.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine named is Dr. Dave Baptiste. He's an optometrist. We went to lunch one day, he came back, he had on his pair of Timberland shoes, Timberland boots, you know, long jabot shorts and a regular polo shirt.
Yeah.
He shows back up into Walmart. He's working in Walmart Vision Center. So he asked the assistant, okay, who's up? Who's doing what? So the lady was like, she pointed or so. So he pointed, it's a black woman. Black woman sitting there. And he go, man, what you haven't done today? Because, you know, what brings you to the eye doctor? And she was like, I came to see the eye doctor. He said, well, what brings you to see the eye doctor? So she was like, well, why are you asking? He said, ma'am, okay, we'll sit there. Well, who you said was, who else? So he passed up.
Right.
He said, well, your girl right there said, well, come on, man, come on, have a seat. Come sit in the machine. Look into the machine right here. I'm going in the back of the machine. So he goes in the back, slides on a pair of scrubs, and throws on a white coat. Do you feel better now?
Wow.
Right? I was trying to ask you, could have gotten you done. You could have been finished, but now you have to help. So, you know, relatively just on vision alone, they're not used to seeing us. That was about within the last 10, 15 years. Hopefully that changes amongst everybody because our sense of comfort changes when we go to the doctor because we see people that look and reflect us. In most instances, black folks, black men, don't go to the doctor because the level of comfort is just not there. You guys figure out a way to have what y'all call it, bedside manner. Just relax. Get folks to just be comfortable.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we have to do.
Yeah.
Right. So you said demand for a doctor. It should be extremely high.
Yeah.
It should be. Right. It's not as high as demand for a barber. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
They got dudes ain't gonna miss going to get a haircut. It could be raining, it could be flooding outside. They're not missing coming to get a haircut.
Yeah.
Ask them about going to the doctor.
Right.
That's what we have to change. So our lives, our health, all of that stuff matters even more so because now we have a generation of young black doctors who can now understand what it means to be able to reach younger people, to be able to reach middle-aged people, and have them with the sense of confidence say that I'm going to run to the doctor. I'm going to see Jane. I'm going to see Doc, man.
Yeah.
Right? Barbershop, they see these people coming in. You don't have to have on a white coat. You can be who you are.
Yeah.
It's going to become relative to understanding and knowing that we could ask you and talk to you about what we need to talk to you about. And then you say, well, listen, man, we're going to follow up. Come on to my office. Let's go get some this, that, and that.
Yeah.
Every barbershop should have it.
Yeah.
People just got to be educated.
You have to be educated.
Starting with the young. Like with my children, I have to teach them about the importance of going to the doctor.
Yeah.
It's got to be talked about. I know when I was coming up, my grandmother, she got tables, but I was only when we were sick. We had to get shot. We're crazy. Other than that, those conversations were being held. Now that we're adults, life threw everything at us. We eat bad. I get sick, I go to the hospital. Now I realize the importance of it. But I wasn't taught that. It's important for you to go to the doctor just to check on your health. Like we go get our teeth cleaned every 6 months.
For sure.
Supposed to. So that's something that we taught. You got to talk that to people, who don't know. I mean, we sit every day up there. Yes, don't say nothing.
How many weeks there was we saw Ricky and Ricky was steadily shrinking? Right?
He had lost 40 pounds. He didn't have 40 pounds to lose.
Right.
I told him that's why they have doctors.
And Ricky is no longer with us.
Yep. One or two after that, he was gone.
Ricky, Tom's son, Ricky. Remember Tom used to work here?
Tosh.
His son. How y'all doing? Good afternoon.
All day. I got a lot of info.
I mean, you want something to eat? You want something to eat?
I'm good. I went out there and got water. All right.
Grab me something to take with you, man.
No, I'm good. All right, still there. All right. Blessed and happy.
Thank you, man. Thank you for hanging in there with us.
These kind of sessions like this should be all over the United States.
Sure.
Bro.
Yeah.
Appreciate
all this was solid.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right.
That's been a pillar in this community that even before the cameras was on was really giving game and really pouring into the youth to really just impact this community in a positive way. And so as I said earlier, let's keep the conversation going. Let's continue to just dispel the narrative around mental health, the negative narrative around mental health, and really just promote men really just talking about their feelings in a positive way. And so whether that's in the shop, whether that's with your spouse, whether that's with your kids, let's really just continue to promote the aspect of mental health and really seeking mental health providers to make sure that we're whole and dealing with any traumas, whether they're the big T's or the small T's. But thank you all again for making time to make a space. That's all, folks. Thank you.
That's the mental health issue. Yeah, that's